It is the 26th of June, and this day in Baptist history is Mania in Massachusetts. Our scripture reading is Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 12. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. We have already observed that the founder of the Massachusetts Bay Colony came to America purposing to establish on the shores of the New World a theocracy, with the only concession being subordination to the British Crown. However, it is possible to trace the vestiges of Baptist faith almost to the settlement of Boston in 1630. Nearly 1,500 people accompanied Governor John Winthrop, and even among those original citizens, grave doubts began to be expressed concerning infant baptism. The brutal beating of Obadiah Holmes in 1651 surely stimulated interest in the thinking of many. Doubtless the public wondered why a man would suffer so painfully for a doctrine if it was so inconsequential. Confessedly, Holmes's beating was a stimulation in the thinking of the first president of Harvard College, Henry Dunster. His adoption of the Baptist principle of believer's baptism led to his being discharged from his honorable position. Subsequently, Thomas Gould, who had been a member of the same congregational church as Henry Dunster, repudiated pedo-baptism and led the way in the founding of the First Baptist Church of Boston in 1665. The vision of a theocracy in the Bay Colony did not die easily, however. Varied persecutions among the Baptists continued on until 1833, when the Massachusetts Bill of Rights was amended to guarantee the completion of separation of church and state in that commonwealth. From the very outset of public dissent by Roger Williams, the officials determined that they would not tolerate any dissent, either in word, deed, or act. This is evident in the first rulings of the court. At the time of Williams's banishment, the court pronounced the same sentence upon John Smith, a Dorchester miller, and I quote, "For diverse dangerous opinions which he holdeth and hath divulged." End of quote. As a result, Smith, for his thoughts and words, and Williams, for his words and deeds, were both banished from the Commonwealth in October 1635. The catalogue of maltreatment would form a tremendous treatise, but let us mention just a few of the forms of punishment. Armitage wrote, and I quote, "The authorities began to punish Baptists in Massachusetts Bay under the law of 1644. William Witter of Lynn was arraigned and before the Essex Quarterly Court, February 1646. He was there for saying that they who stayed while a child is baptized do worship the devil. Brother Witter certainly did give very free use of his tongue, but the court had an effectual cure for all heretics who did that. The law would not connive at such opinions. They were a hazard to the whole commonwealth. He had openly condemned infant baptism and had purposely departed the congregation at the ministration of the ordinance, and for such wickedness he must be recompensed. He was sentenced to make a public confession before the congregation at Lynn on the next Sabbath day, or be censured at the next general court. John Wood was arraigned the next day before the same court for professing Anabaptist sentiments and withholding his children from baptism. And John Spur was bound to pay a fine of £20. On July 13, 1651, Spur was expelled from the Boston church because he ceased to commune with them on the belief that their baptism, singing of psalms, and covenant were human inventions. By this time, a spirit of general discontent was settling down upon the public mind, and persons in various places were beginning to express their sympathy for the Baptists and to adopt their sentiments on the subject of infant baptism, a state of things which the magistrates found it difficult to suppress, and which at last forced not only resistance but direct aggression as the surest method of self-defense. Relief was found only in assuming a firm position and a determined stand against such grinding tyranny. End of quote. Continuing quotation, in 1718, 14 persons were imprisoned in Bristol, Massachusetts for refusing to pay the salary of Reverend Mr. Craighead, the parish minister of the Congregational Church at Freetown. In May 1723, Philip Tabor, the Baptist minister, and 3 other assessors in Tiverton and Dartmouth were imprisoned at Bristol for refusing to assess a tax upon the people for the support of the parish minister, Congregational. And they were kept in prison until they could send to England and get the law set aside by the king and council. In Sturbridge, Massachusetts, 5 Baptists were arrested and imprisoned in Worcester jail, and their property seized for the minister's tax from 1749 to 1751. End of quote. Again, quotation. On June 26, 1776, Abner Lewis became co-pastor with Isaac Chase of the newly organized Baptist Church in Hyannis, Massachusetts. He also served churches in Attenborough, 1789 to 94, and Harwick, South Parish, Massachusetts, 1794 to 1809. In Harwick, he and members of his church suffered repeated distraint and imprisonment. End of quote. The word distraint is an archaic English word that was used in the court of law and refers to seizing property from a debtor to satisfy a legal demand. Baptists were used to having their property confiscated and sold for a pittance of its real value to justify the unconscionable demands of the state church to pay the parish minister. Surely Baptists suffered the most rigorously in the colonies of Massachusetts and Virginia. May we, Bible-believing Baptists today, stand true and firm to those biblically based distinctives in our treasure trove of faithful history. To God be the glory.